Hi there, I'm Malcolm Graham Wood and I'm here at Core Finance for my CEO interview spot. My guest today is Stephen Bowler, CEO of IGas Energy. Good to see you again, Steve.
Morning, Malky.
Great to see you. Thank you very much for coming by. We've got lots to talk about. Try and keep it to about an hour or so this time. I wonder, this is probably not what I would normally ask, but things have changed so much in the last few months. I wonder if you could tell us, given the changes that have happened in the market, in the oil market, we'll talk about the prices later, but the oil market, onshore, carbon, and everything else, how you've restructured IGas to take advantage of what's happening.
That's a big question, isn't it? It's a big question. I suppose, if you go back to our core business, which remains our core business, the conventional production, that's 2,000 barrels a day for 2021. And we expect the same level of production in 2022. So that's just over sort of 700,000 barrels more per annum. So you can plug in whichever oil price you want. But last year we realised $68 a barrel on average. And that generated, before hedging costs, where we lost some money on hedging, but before hedging costs, about £14 million of operating cash inflow pre-G&A and pre-capex, obviously. So that business, as you know, has been producing for many, many decades in some cases, and still is incredibly resilient. We do reinvest back into that, and there are some good opportunities we'll probably come back onto later. But our strategy, we'll come on to geothermal, but when we bought the geothermal business in 2020, is we are a domestic energy provider. That's what we are good at. And our key skill sets are operating in communities, and we do that in many different communities, and to leverage our experience and infrastructure and skills. That's really what we're trying to do.
Good.
So that's the same.
I'm going to come back to that later on because it's a specialist of yours.
So that's whether that be geothermal, whether that be the hydrogen, whether that's if shale happens.
Right.
But all of that is additive to the core business, which we had a reserves report done at the back end of last year by D&M, so they normally do it, and a 1p NPV10 of $140 million and a 2p NPV10 of $190 million. And that was a sort of the next 2 years high 60s, and then inflated thereafter. And if you add 10% to that, so modest increase, that adds about $40 million of NPV to our asset.
No wonder the share price has gone up, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it should be, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
At the top end, that's over £1 a share on the conventional business.
Yeah.
And then you have to layer in, you could sort of pick whichever ones you probably think might happen to get you value over that.
Excellent. Talk about the unconventional side now. That's what people have been talking about a bit more recently. How's it going to be, how are you going to change because you've got unconventional on the back burners and you've got things which now might be brought forward. Tell us how you see that happening.
If you maybe just take a step back to remind everybody, but we drilled a well which was carried by INEOS, so on the licence acreage there in 2019 at Springs Road, so in the east, North Nottinghamshire, down to about 3,000 metres, and we found a very thick section of shales. That was sent off for interpretation by Weatherford, named at the time, and they came back and said, look, this has got every single property that you would hope for a very prospective shale resource. So that, other than we haven't fracked that well, but everything else looks very, very encouraging, and probably the closest analogous play is the Marcellus. So that's what we sort of know. Then the moratorium came in at the back end of 2019. And then we haven't done very much since then. So in light of the recent review that's been commissioned, so the government have commissioned a review by the BGS.
So what does the BGS review look at?
Well, the British Geological Survey, they have to produce a review by the end of June. That's the request from Bayes, and they're going to look at three things. So the first one is new technologies. Is there more data that's available? We think there is some data available out there to help with that. Secondly is, are there other areas that are seismically quieter than the northwest? We believe the East Midlands is, which is where we'd want to go to next. And thirdly is the traffic light system, the system that was set for pauses, is that appropriate compared to other industries, because it's much lower than construction or quarrying or anything else. So I think that will be a helpful review, and we know if we are given the go ahead, we would want to go back to Springs Road. We could start material production quickly, ramp it up with multiple fracked wells, and have production on stream within 12 to 18 months to help the country. And
that would be brilliant. Yeah. This will be a good time to talk about we need gas and the price of gas and so on. So, first of all, why don't we just have your thoughts on the gas price? It's moved very quickly. Most people in the industry don't think it's going to come down very quickly. So tell us about that, and then I'll ask you about why domestic is going to be so important.
Yeah. Well, from a gas price perspective, I suppose we other than it's obviously shale is natural gas. So that is the first point. That's not always, it's exactly the same as everything else. The long-term gas price actually helps our business from a geothermal perspective. So because that's the comparison for heat. So if that's staying high, which it looks like it is, that means that we're very competitive on price alone, ignoring all the decarbonisation benefits. Then obviously from our conventional business, that's mostly oil, and we have hedged out this year 300,000 barrels at about just over $70 a barrel, and the rest is unhedged. Because
keep it like that, mate. You know what I think about hedging, but not too much of that.
I'm happy to have some.
But, quite. And everybody says quite rightly, whether conventional, whatever, and gas or oil, that everyone has to hedge either for their capex or the debt or a bit of both or whatever. So, more importantly, let's take that one stage further and talk about what it means to the person in the street who says, why do I want to effectively approve oil and gas production domestic onshore in the UK? So safety, so costs, so carbon, so travel, how does it all stack for you?
I mean, for me, it's just it's logical, because we've got it here. Yes, people do have concerns, and that just means community engagement, which is what we do to explain what we do. Because it was when we went to Springs Road originally, for example, and we went to the local community, that's less than 10 miles away from Gainsborough, where the wells have been producing since the 60s that we operate. And people didn't know that they were there.
Yeah.
Which actually shows what a good job all of the guys on the ground at IGas do, and other operators, that people don't know it's there. So I think that's the first thing that you need to explain to people. But, we've said that a pad, if we follow a Marcellus type pad structure of up to, say, 16 wells on a single pad, which is about 3 football fields size, that could, and you replicate that 5 times, which we could do in that area, we could produce gas for 3 million homes.
That's amazing.
In the UK.
Yeah.
So, and that is replicable again in many different.
For a day or a year or
on a sort of peak production, I suppose. So it can be very meaningful, but we've said, we will contribute money to the local communities, which could be in the.
This is what I said earlier on: is that you have incredible rapport with the people where you're working, don't you?
And there is some inconvenience because you've got vehicle movements and all those sort of things. But I think we built up trust with the people in Misson and the surrounding areas when we were drilling Springs Road. We did what we said we would do. So there is some disturbance, but because as there is with quarry and construction, anything, but it can be very meaningful, and it's it's jobs. At the end of the day, even if you take an environmental standpoint, purely environmental, domestic production, onshore or offshore, is 4 times better than importing it, LNG. And as a country, in January, LNG was the biggest contributor to our gas needs, which is extraordinary when we used to be an exporter 20 years ago.
And with the exception of the advantages of cost and low carbon and so on, these communities might get a football hut from you, or a village hall.
Well,
or
if
a local tax even,
if it
perhaps.
becomes material and it's 1%, 2%, or 3%, it's tens of millions of pounds. The
So
local
they will
community.
get a local sort of tax advantage, nothing to do with government at all, presumably. And it's
No, that would be that would be by the by the partnership in the case of that area, and we would be giving it to the local community for them to determine where they want to spend that money. And it could be material.
coppers on the beat, or it could be a football club, or it could be a village hall, or
Whatever.
You don't get involved in that, presumably.
No, because every site is different, isn't it? So
am I right in thinking that mostly the disruption and disturbance is right at the beginning, when you're drilling stuff, sorting out roads, and when the oil or the gas is coming out? After it's settled down a bit, it's
Well, absolutely. A lot of, especially for gas, it's a wellhead.
Yeah.
People don't realise, and why should they? That you drill a well with a rig that say it's 30 metres tall or whatever. That's there to drill the well, and then if you're into pad drilling, you drill a few, and then that's gone. It doesn't stay there forever. So it's very important to engage with those local communities, but it could be meaningful. It can create jobs, and do all of the balance of payments, everything that we need. And I think it's not just shale we need to be going after. It's all of these forms of energy, because it's the importing that causes the big price issues. Because if we're buying LNG, we are going to be paying the highest amount. You're bidding against other countries.
As you were, and this is an LNG which might come out of an associated product of an oil well in the States, and be trucked, come over at vast cost and so on. But and the bottom line is, when you're onshore UK, as you say, you're delivering from a modest wellhead even to the local factory or schools or houses, and you're in it's a mighty strong position. And the ultimate irony, of course, is that some of this is in areas where coal mining used to take place.
Yeah.
And I've actually been with a company where we've driven through villages in Nottinghamshire wwhere there are still piles and working remains on the surface, which are way bigger than anything would be if you were producing gas in the area. So I think we've wrapped up that bit, that we know how important hydrocarbon production is, how good it is in terms of transport costs and associated costs, and the government is taking an important role now, and they're doing it quite quickly, aren't they? I get the impression that, as you say, the BGS have to be back quite soon.
Yeah, by the end of June.
You've got ministers, you've got 2 ministers on the case who are actually they're not pro it as such, but they want to be pro it to make it work, haven't you?
No, there are a few ministers who are very pro.
Some positive stuff. Can we move over to geothermal? Because, a few months ago, before this had happened, I've been looking at the Stoke-on-Trent thing with great excitement, I have to say. As I said before the interview, I thought it was a bit longer, but actually it hasn't been that long. No. So can you talk me through your position in geothermal?
Yeah.
I assume we all think it's going to work. How it might be really important again for not just for IGas, but for the economy in general, and Stoke-on-Trent, for example.
Yeah. Well, so I'll start at the beginning and sort of just to remind people. We bought GT Energy in September of 2020. Since that time, the most advanced project is Stoke, where SSE now are going to build out the heat network in Stoke. It was originally the council themselves, so they've stepped into the shoes of the council. They're delivering on that. That's sort of halfway through build. That's sort of, I suppose, the history. And what have we been doing since September 20 is working with government on not just Stoke, but on a number of different projects. Because if you go to Paris, there's 30 odd of these, and similar in Munich, and they're very meaningful to contribute to the heat requirements. Right? And remember, in Europe, we're the second largest user of gas for heat, behind the Netherlands. So we absolutely, that's our comparator. So government have come out recently and said that for geothermal, we, the operator, could apply to the Green Heat Networks Fund, which is up to sort of 290 million is the pot for that. Apply for that fund. Geothermal now is confirmed to sit within it, and we can apply for 50% of our capex to come out of that fund, and that is paid for by government. That doesn't need to be repaid.
It's an important move, isn't it?
It's a hugely, I think there's really three things that have changed. So there's that, which we're delighted with that support, because there is no other way to really decarbonise very large urban buildings, so council buildings, hospitals. Those are all the sorts of people that we're talking to have a big heat need. People are looking at long-term gas prices now, and going, well, it used to be, we'd assume, I don't know, 20p, 30p, 40p, and now assuming 70p.
Yeah.
So that helps us. And thirdly, everybody is trying to decarbonise their heat, and they're really, at scale for old buildings, which is what deep geothermal is, there is little alternative. You can't retrofit them there, that's really expensive. So what do you do in an urban environment? And deep geothermal is really the answer, and that's been demonstrated in Europe.
Quite often in the UK, these big buildings, whether they're hospitals or council buildings or whatever they happen to be, quite often them are very old, aren't they?
Exactly.
They might be Victorian buildings. If you try and heat however good you are, all the bits, I think you find that so if you manage to find your geothermal, and it works, it's a big,
the
SSE are on the case in Stoke-on-Trent. They think it's just a matter of time getting it into the place.
Yes, we all do.
And how quickly can you?
Well, if we are talking to SSE about the offtake at the moment, so we hope that we agree that in Q3 this year. That means that we would then reach financial close around the end of the year, and then we're about sort of 18 months probably we've got to drill 2 wells to about 4,000 metres and put surface infrastructure on. So that's sort of at least 18 months until we're delivering revenue. But the key is to get that financial close and get that project going, and because we've got a number of different ones following on behind. We're talking to people in Manchester, Liverpool, Southampton, Bournemouth, and what's really changed, even probably over the past 6 months, is the amount of people coming to us because they're trying to find a solution.
You'd be mad not to, wouldn't you? If you're a town or a city with a number of big hospitals and council buildings and everything else.
Yes. And each project is slightly different. Schools could be, but
still a bit small.
I guess if it's on a heat network, so you're either looking at our typical size project, and they're all going to be a bit bigger or smaller, is about 10 megawatts.
Right.
So Stoke is a bit larger than that because it goes into a network. But hospitals, airports, they're really, that's a huge demand.
Well, you've got plenty of them to be working on before you start worrying about losing potential clients. Your addressable audience, as they would say, is pretty limitless for the time being, because it's going to take a little while to roll all these things out. But it's I can see it being quite difficult to be an opponent of, if it works, if you're heating a hospital or a council building from geothermal. So
and our target audience is heat. We're not. We hope we may get a bit of electricity generation, but what we are competing against is gas. From a heating perspective, that's what we address. That's the addressable market for us.
Fantastic. Before I close, obviously I need to know about you've got other renewable plans, and you've talked to me in the past about opening up. I mean, your eyes are wide open about what other things IGas might do. What have you got? You're going to be hydrogen.
We've got a couple of projects in planning for hydrogen. So at Albury and Bletchingley. In the Weald, they're taking longer, unfortunately, in the planning
Jim
system.
Ratcliffe's a big fan of hydrogen, isn't
he? I think they are going to be one of the most material producers of hydrogen. We're working with Cornish Lithium to see if we can't help them with their development scenarios down in Cornwall. We've got a solar project that we're looking at, that we're talking to the district, the network operators for a grid connection on, and the landowner. So there's lots of other things where we'll have some more news flow as we go through the year, I'm sure.
Brilliant. Funding? How's IGas funded at the moment?
Right, we've got the RBL.
Yeah.
So we've got plenty of capacity in the RBL. We go through a 6 monthly redetermination, so we'll go through the
balance sheet looks good because your receivables are looking good, and also, you're doing the hedging sensibly, as I would say, to make sure you've got a bit.
Yeah. So our balance
leeway
is
on
always
both
going to be, we don't expect the geothermal business to take much sort of cash capital, because that will be government funded, and we'll put some non-recourse debt in those projects, which is, we've got a heads of terms for that before. So, when we set out the budget this year was to have some marginal deleveraging. Obviously, we still want to do that and more than we were budgeting for, and then just balance that up with the capital reinvestment.
Good.
So that's why we're looking at.
Happy shareholders? You've got a good list of shareholders, haven't you?
Well, I think the
They're happier than they.
sector has gone through a difficult time, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But, we were at low teens at the start of the year. We're anywhere between sort of 30 and 40 odd pence at the moment, and lots of catalysts for that to
Lots of
improve
scope
further.
for the upside, I think, I would say. The usual thing is, as we get to the end of the interview, and probably much more difficult than usual to say now, but I'm going to ask you to say where you think IGas will be in 12 to 18 months' time. We'll take as read that we think the oil and gas price is going to be high, but not necessarily different from here. Where will you see IGas in 12 to 18 months' time, Steve?
Well, I think we're certainly not banking on shale. Okay,
Yeah, good weed.
I think, as I said earlier, it's a logical solution, and we're happy to work with government and the local communities to help, the country in its net zero ambitions, really, because that's what it's about. But on the other side of things, we hope to get results back on the hydrogen projects. If not, we'll move one of them to a gas to wire project, I expect. We'll have news on geothermal, so I'd hope we've got at least a couple of projects through offtake agreements and into financial close. So, because really that business has got a lot of momentum behind it, so that's what we need to show the market and our investors. And then we'll have updates on all the other pieces in the low carbon world. So it's hard to say when all of those things will come through, but I expect we've deleveraged the balance sheet considerably. We're moving geothermal forwards, and we can actually demonstrate material momentum in that business. So I think it's a very exciting time. Actually.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, taking time out to come and talk to me and our viewers today. I've been Malcolm Graham Wood, and I'm at Core Finance doing my usual CEO interview. My guest today has been Stephen Bowler, the CEO of IGas Energy. Thank you very much for coming in. Great to see you again, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck with all your plans. You've got a fair wind behind you and looking good, so I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye now.